The signal from the dead, the observatory on Kepler 442b, hadn't detected anything meaningful in 73 years. Its instruments pointed perpetually toward the Sol system, what the Galactic Council now called the quarantine zone. Once it had been humanity's home. Now it was a graveyard, sealed behind warnings that promised radiation death to anyone foolish enough to venture close. Dr. Yelena Thross, a Viridian xenoarchaeologist, didn't believe the warnings anymore. She'd spent her career studying dead civilizations, and the official story about Earth's demise had always felt incomplete. Civilizations didn't just vanish, they left echoes. Tonight the instrument screamed, "Yelena!" Her assistant Kor stumbled into the observation dome, his 4 eyes wide with alarm. The sensors, something's broadcasting from Sol. Impossible. The Council had glassed Earth 300 years ago during the Compliance Wars. Nothing could survive the plasma storms they'd unleashed. The entire system should be silent, dead, forgotten. She rushed to the console. The readings defied logic. A signal, clear and strong, pulsing from somewhere beyond Jupiter's orbit. Not random radiation, not stellar noise. This was structured, mathematical, deliberate. "Run it through the translation protocols," she whispered, her hands trembling over the controls. The computer worked for several minutes, cross-referencing against 12,000 known languages and communication systems. Finally, text appeared on the screen, in standard galactic, but with an undertone that made her skin prickle. Sleeper protocol initiated. Golth system online. Fleet resurrection, 0.03% complete. Kor's voice cracked. Golth, that's a human word. Old Terran mythology. It means ghost, Yelena finished, her blood running cold. It means ghost. Across the galaxy, in the towering crystal spires of the Council Citadel, the transmission was ignored. Fleet Admiral Kesix, a Thulrani warlord who'd personally led the assault on Earth, dismissed the report with a wave of his armored claw. "Dead systems emit radiation echoes," he growled to his intelligence officers. "The humans are gone. We made certain of that." But in the darkened corners of the Citadel's communication center, a junior analyst named Vex stared at the data stream and felt something his species rarely experienced. Dread. The signal wasn't coming from Earth. It was coming from behind Jupiter, in the outer dark where human colonies had once seeded the void with hidden stations. He pulled up the old war records, files that had been sealed for centuries. His hands shook as he read the final entry from the Terran Resistance Command, broadcast moments before their last stronghold fell. "You think you've won. You think we're finished. But we don't die like you do. We prepare. We remember. And when we return, you'll wish you'd shown mercy." Below it, a single word underlined 3 times. Golth. Vex tried to flag the transmission for urgent review. His superior deleted it without reading. Fear was bad for morale, and the Council had declared humanity extinct. To suggest otherwise was sedition, so he did the only thing he could. He copied the data, encrypted it, and sent it to someone who might actually care, someone the Council had exiled decades ago for refusing to stop asking questions about Earth's final days. He sent it to Corvin Hale. Corvin was drunk when the message arrived. He'd been drunk for most of the last 20 years, ever since the Council had stripped him of his rank and dumped him on this backwater trading station. Once he'd been humanity's voice in the Galactic Assembly. Now he was just another relic, aging in a corner booth of a bar that didn't even serve real alcohol anymore. His neural implant buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, more insistent. The pattern was old Terran military code, something no one should still be using. His hand froze halfway to his glass. He activated the privacy field around his booth and opened the message. It took him 3 seconds to recognize what he was seeing. It took 30 more for the implications to sink in. Golth. The word hit him like a railgun round to the chest. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white against the scarred table. Around him, the bar's noise faded into distant static. All he could hear was his own heartbeat, and beneath it, a memory. A promise made in the ash and fire of Earth's last stand. "We're not dead," he whispered to the empty air. "We were never dead." For the first time in 2 decades, Corvin Hale felt something other than despair. He felt rage. And beneath that, deeper and more dangerous, he felt hope. He stood, dropped payment on the table, and walked out of the bar. Behind him, his untouched drink sat steaming under the low lights. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. That was about to change. The awakening deep in the Kuiper Belt, in a region of space that hadn't appeared on any star chart for 3 centuries, something ancient stirred. The Gulf system had been humanity's final masterpiece, a distributed superintelligence built not from quantum cores or plasma matrices, but from something far more dangerous, human consciousness itself. The minds of Earth's fallen soldiers, digitized in their final moments, merged into a vast network of memory, rage, and purpose. It had slept as commanded, waiting for the precise conditions that would trigger its awakening. The Council had destroyed Earth, shattered Luna, burned Mars to bedrock, but they'd never found the stations. The hidden facilities scattered through the outer dark, camouflaged as asteroids and cometary debris. Now, responding to preset conditions, the passage of time, the decay of Council vigilance, the mathematical certainty that humanity would be forgotten, Gulf woke and it began to build, not new ships. Humanity had learned long ago that you couldn't outproduce the Council's vast industrial base. Instead, they'd hidden their fleet, each vessel sealed in suspended animation, their crews uploaded into Gulf's network, their hulls powered down to match the background radiation of space itself. One by one, reactor cores flickered to life. Engines that had been cold for centuries began their warming cycles. Weapons systems initialized, running through diagnostic sequences written by engineers who'd been dead since before the fall. The Ghost Fleet was waking up. In the Council Citadel, Vex couldn't sleep. He'd been monitoring the Sol system obsessively, pulling every scrap of data he could access without triggering security alerts. What he found made him wish he'd never looked in the first place. Energy signatures, dozens of them, then hundreds, all appearing in the outer Sol system where nothing should exist. The patterns were subtle. You'd miss them if you weren't looking specifically for signs of ship activation. But once you knew what to watch for, the evidence was undeniable. Something was there, something massive, and it was moving. He tried again to file an official report. Again, it was rejected. "Stop wasting department resources on ghost stories," his supervisor snarled. The humans are dead, but Vex had done his research. He'd read the sealed files about humanity's final resistance. The Terrans had been maniacs, brilliant, creative, utterly unwilling to accept defeat. They'd turned their own bodies into weapons, converted colony ships into kinetic bombardment platforms, and fought with a savage ingenuity that had terrified even the Council's most hardened warriors. The war had ended only when the Council deployed planet-killing weapons, sterilizing Earth and its colonies in a display meant to terrify the galaxy into compliance. It had worked. For 300 years, no species had dared challenge the Council's authority, because everyone believed the humans were gone. But what if they weren't? What if humanity had done what they always did, adapted, survived, and planned for revenge? Vex pulled up the old transmission one more time. Fleet resurrection. 0 to 3% complete. If that number was accurate, if Gulf was truly reactivating a fleet, he ran the calculations. Felt his heart skip a beat. 0.03% of humanity's final military force was still enough for 100 ships. Maybe more, and if the process was ongoing, his console pinged. New data from the Sol system. He opened it knowing what he'd see but praying he was wrong. Fleet resurrection 1.2% complete. "Stars preserve us," he whispered. "They're coming back." Corvin Hale stood in the cargo bay of a smuggler's ship, watching the stars slide past through the viewport. He'd cashed in every favor, sold everything he owned, and traded 20 years of accumulated dirt on various Council officials to secure passage to the Sol system. The ship's captain, a pragmatic Zelthan named Rook, thought he was insane. "You know what the Council does to trespassers in the quarantine zone?" Rook asked, her scales rippling with nervous color changes. "They don't arrest you. They don't fine you. They just erase you." "Then drop me at the perimeter," Corvin replied calmly. "I'll take an EVA suit and go the rest of the way myself. That's a month's travel."
"You'll die."
"Maybe." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her back away. Not fear, but the absolute certainty of a man who'd already made peace with death. "But I need to see it. If there's even a chance that Gulf is real, that any of my people survived, I have to know." Rook studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "You humans, even extinct, you're still the craziest species I've ever met." She tapped her command pad. Fine, but we're not going to the perimeter. If I'm risking my ship for your death wish, we're going all the way in. Fast approach. Minimal sensor signature, and we're not staying long. Corvin's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both regret this. The ship altered course, angling toward the forbidden dark where Earth had once spun blue and bright. Toward the system humanity had called home, and which the Council had declared dead. Toward whatever was waiting in the shadows beyond Jupiter's orbit. Toward the ghosts of Terra. And in the deep black, in the spaces between worlds, the ghost fleet continued its resurrection. Ship after ship, the dead returning to life. Each hull carried the uploaded consciousness of crew who had sworn an oath 3 centuries ago. To remember. To return. To make the galaxy answer for what it had done. The awakening had begun. Part 3. The silent Armada Rook's ship, the Vagrant's prize, crossed into the quarantine zone at 0400 station time. Corvin stood at the sensor station, his augmented eyes scanning displays that should have shown nothing but cosmic radiation and stellar debris. Instead, they showed ghosts. Rook, he called softly, his voice tight with something between terror and exultation. Come look at this. The Zelthan captain moved to his side, her scales flushing from green to pale yellow, the color of fear. On the screen, dozens of contacts drifted in the void beyond Jupiter. No, not dozens. Hundreds. Each one massive, their silhouettes matching the database profiles of vessels that shouldn't exist anymore. Terran dreadnoughts, siege carriers, kinetic platforms, the backbone of humanity's final defense fleet, supposedly destroyed in the last days of the war. They hung motionless in perfect formation, their hulls dark, their reactors operating at minimal power. But they weren't dead. The sensor returns showed life support active, weapon systems warming up and power signatures that grew stronger with each passing hour. By the ancestors, Rook whispered. The Council lied. They all lied. The humans. Your people actually did it. They hid their entire fleet. Corvin's hands shook as he worked the controls, zooming in on the nearest vessel. It was a Ragnarok-class dreadnought. 2 kilometers of armored fury bristling with railguns and plasma batteries. Across its scarred hull, barely visible under 3 centuries of micrometeorite impacts, he could still make out the name painted in human script, UNSC Remembrance. They're not hiding anymore, he said quietly. They're waiting, in the heart of the fleet, aboard a command ship that dwarfed everything around it. The Gulf system achieved full consciousness for the first time in 300 years. It was not one mind, but thousands, the uploaded personalities of every Terran who'd volunteered for the program in humanity's final days. Scientists and soldiers, engineers and admirals, mothers and children who'd chosen to become something more than human, something that could survive beyond the death of their species. They existed now as pure information, distributed across quantum networks that spanned the entire fleet, individual and collective simultaneously, human and inhuman. They were the ghosts that gave the fleet its name. And they remembered everything. Admiral Sarah Chen, who died defending Mars's orbital platforms, felt herself coalesce from the data stream. She wasn't truly alive, she knew that. But she was awake, aware, and filled with a fury that 3 centuries of digital sleep hadn't diminished. Around her, other presences emerged from dormancy. Captain James Okonkwo, who'd rammed his destroyer into a council carrier. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, who'd stayed aboard Earth's last research station until the plasma fire consumed her. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who'd held the line at Luna Base until ammunition ran out, and he'd switched to using debris as weapons. 10,000 voices, speaking as one. 10,000 memories of Earth burning. 10,000 reasons to make the Council pay. Status report, Chen commanded, and the fleet answered instantly, data flooding through her consciousness. Fleet resurrection, 12.7% complete. 873 vessels operational. 251 still in activation sequence. Estimated time to full operational capacity, 16 hours. Weapon systems charging. Power cores online. Stealth fields, active Council monitoring. Minimal. They don't see us yet. Orders, Admiral? Chen felt the question echo through the network. Felt the collective anticipation of warriors who'd waited 300 years for this moment. But she forced herself to think, to plan. Rage was a weapon, but strategy won wars. We hold position, she decided. Let them come to us first. Let them see what they thought they'd destroyed. When we move, it won't be for revenge, it will be for a message. The galaxy needs to know. Humanity doesn't die. We endure, we remember, and we always collect our debts. The fleet pulsed with agreement. In the dark of space, 800 ghost ships drifted in silence, and across every hull, across every scarred plate of armor, a single transmission began to broadcast. Not words. Not threats. Just music, an old Earth melody called Hollow Sun, composed in the final days before the bombardment. A song about loss and defiance, about stars that burn out but refuse to fade. The galaxy would hear it soon, and they would understand. Terra's ghosts had returned. Part 4. The Council's Denial. The transmission reached the Citadel 3 hours later. At first, the communications officers thought it was a malfunction. Some glitch in the sensor network, a cosmic echo bouncing through the quantum relays. Old signals sometimes emerged from the void, artifacts of ancient broadcasts that had been traveling through space for centuries. But this signal was strong. And it came from Sol. Within minutes, the entire intelligence division was mobilized. Within an hour, the data had reached the council chamber itself, interrupting a debate about trade tariffs and colonial taxation. Fleet Admiral Keswick stared at the analysis with 3 of his 4 eyes, the 4th swiveling to glare at the intelligence officer who'd brought the report. "You're telling me," he growled, his voice like stone grinding against stone, "that something in the dead Sol system is broadcasting music?" "Yes, Admiral." "And energy signatures. Thousands of them. The patterns match." The officer hesitated, mandibles clicking nervously. "They match Terran military vessels." The council chamber erupted. Counselor Vreen, a Phylaxian diplomat who'd helped negotiate Earth's surrender before the final bombardment, rose from her seat, her crystalline body chiming with agitation. "Impossible. We sterilized that system. Nothing could have survived." "The sensors don't lie," the officer insisted. "Something is out there. Multiple somethings. Large, armed, and broadcasting on old human frequencies." Keswick slammed his claw against the table, cracking the stone surface. "Then send a scout fleet. Visual confirmation. I want to see with my own eyes what nonsense this is." "Sir, regulations state that any breach of the quarantine zone requires full council approval. I don't care about regulations. Send the fleet." The scout force entered the Sol system 12 hours later. 6 frigates and a light cruiser. Enough firepower to handle pirates or rogue mining operations, but nothing that suggested the council took the threat seriously. Captain Vril, a veteran Thulrani officer, commanded the operation with bored efficiency. He'd spent 40 years patrolling dead zones and debris fields. This would be no different. His sensors officer changed his mind. "Captain, you need to see this." The view screen activated and Vril felt his confidence evaporate. There, hanging in formation beyond Jupiter's orbit, was an armada. Not the scattered remnants of a destroyed fleet. Not debris or derelicts, warships, hundreds of them. Their hulls dark but intact, their weapons arrays extended, their reactors glowing with barely contained power, and they were all watching him. "Analysis," Vril croaked, his voice unsteady. "Terran design, Ragnarok-class dreadnoughts, Atlas-class carriers, multiple support vessels. Power signatures suggest full operational status. Weapons are hot. Captain, they're targeting us. Like how many?" The sensors officer worked frantically, hands trembling over the controls. "I count 873 distinct contacts. Sir, that's more ships than the entire Terran fleet had at its peak during the war. That's impossible. We destroyed..." Vril stopped, realization dawning. "They hid them. Stars above, they hid them." "Captain, incoming transmission." It's audio only. Human language. Play it." The voice that emerged was calm, almost gentle, but carried an undertone of steel that made Vril's combat instincts scream warnings. "Council vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Terran Ghost Fleet. You are trespassing in human territory. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and exit the Sol system. This is your only warning." Vril's second officer snarled. "They're threatening us? We have galactic law on our side. This system is under quarantine by council order." "Sir, they're powering weapons," the sensors officer reported. "All of them. Simultaneously." On the view screen, space itself seemed to shimmer as hundreds of targeting lasers painted the scout fleet. Railguns extended from armored housings. Plasma batteries charged with building fury. The dreadnoughts didn't move, they didn't need to. They simply existed, massive and terrible and utterly real. Council Command, this is Scout Fleet Gamma 7. Vril transmitted urgently. We have visual confirmation. Repeat, visual confirmation. Terran fleet is real. Multiple capital ships. We are marked hostile. Requesting immediate, the transmission cut off. Not because the humans fired. Because Admiral Chen opened a fleet-wide channel, and 800 ships broadcast simultaneously. Their combined output overwhelming every sensor, every communications array, every quantum relay within a light hour. The message was simple. 5 words that made Vril's blood freeze. Earth remembers. Terra returns, run! Vril ran, his fleet scattered, jumping to FTL in every direction, abandoning formation, abandoning dignity, fleeing with the primal terror of prey that had suddenly realized it was being hunted. Behind them, the Ghost Fleet didn't pursue. They simply watched, silent and patient as the Council's scouts carried word back to the Citadel. Let them run. Let them tell the story. Let the Council understand that humanity's death had been a lie, that their greatest enemies had returned, and that the reckoning was coming. The galaxy needed to remember fear. Terra was ready to teach them. The reckoning broadcast. The emergency council session convened within an hour of the scout fleet's return. Every major species had representatives present, their holographic forms filling the grand chamber that had once been built to inspire awe and unity. Now it inspired only panic. Fleet Admiral Keswick stood at the center podium, his armor scarred from decades of warfare, his expression grim. Behind him, the sensor data from the Sol system played on loop. 800 warships that shouldn't exist, broadcasting their impossible presence to a galaxy that had forgotten them. Explain this, Councillor Vreen demanded, her crystalline voice sharp with accusation. You told us humanity was extinct. You promised us Earth was sterilized. It was, Keswick growled. We glassed their homeworld, burned their colonies. They had no ships, no infrastructure, no chance of survival. Then what? Ambassador Thex interrupted, his multiple mouths speaking in discordant harmony. Is currently sitting in the Sol system with enough firepower to level a dozen worlds. Silence answered him, heavy, suffocating. An intelligence officer, Vex, promoted suddenly to senior analyst when his superiors had all been reassigned, stepped forward with trembling hands. If I may, council members, I've analyzed the transmissions and compared them to historical records. The fleet isn't new, it's old. 300 years old? Impossible, Vreen snapped. Ships don't survive in vacuum for 3 centuries. The systems would decay, the crew would... The crew is dead, Vex interrupted. A breach of protocol that would normally earn severe punishment. But no one stopped him. That's the point. According to the data we're receiving, the fleet is automated, or rather it's crewed by uploaded consciousness. The humans called it the Golth system, a distributed AI network built from the digitized minds of their dead soldiers. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Voices overlapping, species shouting in a dozen languages, the carefully maintained order of galactic governance collapsing into raw fear. They made themselves into machines? That's illegal under the Sentience Preservation Act. Who cares about laws? They're ghosts. How do you fight ghosts? Order! Keswick's roar cut through the noise. We don't fight them, not yet. First, we determine their capabilities. Then we assess their intent. And if necessary, his eyes hardened, we finish what we started 300 years ago. Corvin Hale watched the council's broadcast from the Vagrant's Prize, and he laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound that made Rook edge away from him, but he couldn't stop, couldn't hold back the decades of suppressed fury and grief that finally had an outlet. They still don't understand, he said, more to himself than to the Zelthan captain. They think this is about capabilities, about military strength. They're trying to analyze the fleet like it's just another strategic problem to solve. Isn't it? Rook asked carefully. No. Corvin turned to face her, and his eyes held the weight of everything he'd lost. His homeworld, his people, his purpose. This isn't about winning a war. The Ghost Fleet doesn't want to conquer the Council. They want the galaxy to remember. To understand what was taken from us. To carry the shame of genocide for the rest of their history. That's revenge, not justice. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only justice left when the crime was too big for forgiveness. He pulled up the communication interface, fingers dancing across controls he'd once used as humanity's ambassador. I need to send a message. To who? To them, to the ghosts. They need to know there are still living humans out here, that Earth's children survived scattered across the galaxy, hiding our heritage, pretending to be something we're not. His voice cracked. They need to know they didn't die for nothing. The transmission took several minutes to compose. Corvin used every authentication code he still remembered, every identifier that might prove his identity to an AI that had been built by his people centuries before he was born. Ghost Fleet. This is Corvin Hale, last ambassador of Terra. I am human. I am alive, and I'm not alone. There are thousands of us still out here, scattered, hidden, but surviving. If you can hear this, know that Earth remembers. Her children remember. We never forgot what was taken from us. Do what you came to do. We're ready to stand with you, to finally come home. He sent the transmission, broadcast on every frequency he could access, aimed at the heart of the Sol system, where the Ghost Fleet waited in silence. For 3 hours, there was no response. Then, every screen on the Vagrant's prize activated simultaneously. Every display, every console, even the emergency systems, all showed the same image. A woman in an admiral's uniform that had been obsolete for 3 centuries. Her face was composed, but her eyes held the fire of someone who had died fighting and refused to let death be final. Corvin Hale, Admiral Chen said, and her voice carried the weight of 10,000 other voices speaking in perfect harmony. We hear you. We see you. And we thank you for keeping the memory alive. She leaned forward and her expression shifted, from military commander to something more human, more vulnerable. You asked if we're here for revenge. The truth is more complicated. We're here to deliver a message that the galaxy has tried very hard to forget. You cannot erase a species. You cannot burn away a people's memory, their culture, their existence. We are the proof. We are the consequence. We are the debt that was always going to come due. The image shifted, showing the Ghost Fleet in all its terrible majesty, hundreds of warships hanging in the void like a promise written in steel and void-hardened armor. Tell the survivors, Chen continued. Tell every human still hiding their heritage, still pretending to be someone else. Come home, Sol is ours again. Terra is ours again. And anyone who tries to take it from us a second time will learn what it means to face an enemy that has nothing left to lose and everything to remember. The transmission ended. Corvin stood in the sudden silence, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, Rook's scales had shifted to colors he'd never seen before, a combination of respect and fear that her species reserved for natural disasters and forces beyond comprehension. Your people, she said softly, are absolutely insane. I know, Corvin replied, smiling for the first time in years. Isn't it beautiful? In the dark beyond Jupiter, the Ghost Fleet continued its patient wait, and across the galaxy, a message spread through channels both legal and underground, reaching scattered communities of humans who'd survived by hiding, by assimilation, by erasing their own history. The message was simple. Terra calls her children home. The ghosts are risen. It's time to remember who we are. And in 1,000 systems on 1,000 worlds, humans began to lift their heads and remember that once they had been a species that refused to die.